3,600 years ago, a city 10 times larger than ancient Jerusalem simply ceased to exist. Not conquered, not abandoned, not buried by time. Erased instantly. The walls were driven into the ground, the buildings flattened. The people inside were gone before they could run, before they could even understand what was happening. The temperatures reached levels that melted gold, platinum, and iridium, metals that require heat close to the surface of the sun. And yet no volcano, no crater, no army. The people who survived in neighboring regions passed this story down for generations. Eventually, someone wrote it down, and we know that story today as Sodom and Gomorrah. But what actually happened? Because science has been quietly uncovering evidence for decades, and the truth is far stranger than the myth. Let us go back to the beginning, not the beginning of the story, the beginning of the civilization. The Jordan Valley, roughly 4,000 years ago, was one of the most desirable pieces of land on Earth. The river fed it. The soil was rich. Trade routes from Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Arabian Peninsula all converged in this corridor. Cities grew here not by accident, but because the land demanded it. This was not the barren wasteland you might picture when you imagine the ancient Middle East. Ancient accounts describe it as lush, fertile, a place so green and abundant that people compared it to the Garden of Eden and to the Delta of Egypt, two of the most famously fertile regions in the ancient world. Cities rose, populations grew, trade networks stretched across hundreds of miles. This was a thriving, interconnected civilization at its peak. And then something happened that ended all of it. For most of modern history, scholars treated Sodom and Gomorrah as allegory, a moral parable, a story designed to warn people about wickedness, not a description of real events. But archaeology had other ideas. In the region southeast of the Dead Sea, excavations uncovered 5 ancient cities, now known as Bab ed-Dhra, Numera, Safi, Feifa, and Qanazir. These sites date to the early Bronze Age, roughly 3,300 to 2000 BCE. These were not small villages. Bab ed-Dhra alone was the largest pre-Hellenistic site in the entire Dead Sea region. It had a significant population, a large cemetery that tells us this city existed and buried its dead for over 1,000 years, and the kind of infrastructure that only comes from generations of organized, settled civilization. And 2 of them, Bab ed-Dhra and Numera, show something that stopped archaeologists cold. Both sites were destroyed by fire at approximately the same time, around 2100 BCE, not gradually, not through a long siege. Suddenly. The evidence of burning was not localized to one district or one building. It was everywhere, across both sites, simultaneously. Some researchers noted that even the name Numera may be a linguistic echo of Gomorrah, ancient names preserved inside modern Arabic place names, as they often are across the region. Languages change, empires rise and fall, but place names survive, quietly carrying the memory of what was there before. The conclusion from the researchers who excavated these sites was direct. The archaeological, geographical, and linguistic evidence points to these being the cities described in the ancient texts. But the story does not end there, because a separate team, working a different site, was about to find something that made everything else look small. In the Jordan Valley, northeast of the Dead Sea, sits a mound of earth called Tall el-Hammam. From the outside, it looks unremarkable, a raised area of land in a flat valley. But mounds like this in the ancient Middle East are not natural. They are the accumulated remains of civilizations, layer upon layer of human occupation, each generation building on the ruins of the last, the ground rising slowly over millennia. Archaeological excavations began at Tall el-Hammam in 2005, and what researchers uncovered over the following 15 years rewrote what we thought was possible for ancient destruction events. Tall el-Hammam was not a small settlement. In the Middle Bronze Age, around 1650 BCE, it was the largest continuously occupied Bronze Age city in the southern Levant, 10 times larger than Jerusalem at the time, 5 times larger than Jericho, home to an estimated 8,000 people. It had a palace complex, military fortifications, high walls, and a thriving population that had been building and rebuilding on this site for thousands of years. Think about what that means. Thousands of years of continuous civilization, generation after generation, living, trading, building, burying their dead, raising their children in the same valley. Then it vanished. Not slowly, not through plague or famine or conquest, in an instant. Across the entire city, researchers found a destruction layer, 1.5 meters thick, made of carbon, ash, and obliterated material. This layer was consistent across the whole site, every building, every district, every wall. The entire city was hit simultaneously. Inside that layer, the evidence told a story that no natural disaster on the standard list could explain. Shocked quartz, a mineral that only forms under conditions of extreme pressure, the kind generated by meteor impacts or nuclear detonations. Melted pottery and mud bricks, fused into glass-like material by temperatures far beyond any conventional fire. Diamond-like carbon, which requires extraordinary heat and pressure to form. Soot, remnants of melted plaster. And then the detail that silenced the room when researchers first identified it. Melted grains of platinum, iridium, nickel, gold, silver, zircon, and chromite. Platinum melts at 1,768 degrees Celsius. Iridium melts at 2,446 degrees Celsius. These are not metals that melt in a house fire. They are not metals that melt in a battlefield. They are not metals that melt in any event that human beings of the ancient world could have caused. To reach those temperatures across an entire city, simultaneously with no crater, no volcanic vent, no evidence of a sustained heat source, you need something else entirely. The buildings were not just destroyed, they were driven downward into the ground, compressed, flattened. The same directional pattern seen at Tunguska, Russia in 1908 when a meteor entered the atmosphere and exploded before hitting the ground. The blast wave moved outward and downward. No crater formed, but everything beneath the explosion was obliterated. Tunguska flattened 2,000 square kilometers of Siberian forest. It is estimated to have been equivalent to 10 to 15 megatons of TNT. And Tunguska happened over an uninhabited forest. What happened at Tall el-Hammam happened over a city. The leading explanation among the research team, a cosmic airburst, a meteor or comet traveling at hypersonic speed, entering the atmosphere and detonating in midair directly above or near the city. The heat, the pressure wave, and the ejecta hit the city all at once. There was no warning, there was no escape, there was no survival. And then it was gone. Here is where it gets genuinely interesting. None of Tall el-Hammam's 8,000 residents survived, but people in neighboring regions witnessed it. They saw a flash brighter than the sun. They felt the ground shake. They felt the heat on their skin from miles away. They watched a column of smoke and fire rise from a city that had stood for thousands of years. And they talked about it. This is how oral tradition works. A catastrophic event happens. Survivors describe it. Their children inherit the description. Their grandchildren pass it on. Each generation adds the moral and spiritual weight that humans naturally assign to incomprehensible events. The city was wicked. The gods were angry. The fire came from heaven. And eventually, after enough generations, someone with access to writing materials set it down. Researchers stated directly, a catastrophe like this may have generated an oral tradition that, after being passed down through many generations, became the source of the written story of Sodom. Now consider what the ancient account actually describes: fire raining from the sky, sulfur, which is associated with meteor impacts and their chemical byproducts. A city destroyed instantaneously, a shockwave powerful enough to kill someone standing at a distance. The vegetation of the entire region destroyed, and after the event, the land described as desolate, uninhabitable, covered in salt. The archaeological record at el-Hammam matches every one of those details. The destruction layer contains evidence of extreme salination, salt driven into the soil by the event, making agriculture impossible. The Jordan Valley in the immediate aftermath of whatever happened here shows almost no resettlement for centuries. The land was abandoned. The cities did not rebuild. For hundreds of years, one of the most fertile valleys in the ancient world sat empty. That is not the aftermath of a military conquest. Conquered cities get resettled. New populations move in. Life continues. This was something different. This was a landscape so devastated, so altered, that no one came back. And then there is the detail everyone knows. Lot's wife, who looked back and became a pillar of salt. For centuries, this was read as supernatural punishment, a miracle, a warning. But some researchers now suggest it may be something else entirely. A preserved memory, encoded in story, of what actually happens to a human body caught on the edge of a cosmic airburst blast radius. The shockwave from an event of this magnitude would travel at supersonic speed. The thermal pulse, the wave of superheated air that follows the initial explosion, would be lethal at significant distances. A person standing at the edge of the event zone would be killed instantly. Their body, depending on where they stood relative to the blast, could be left standing, preserved in the position they were in when the wave hit them, before decomposition, before collapse, encrusted in the salt and minerals carried by the shockwave. Not mythology, forensic description encoded into story. This is what ancient oral tradition does. It preserves the observable facts of an event inside a narrative framework that makes sense to the people telling it. The fire came from heaven because it did. The city was destroyed in an instant because it was. The person who looked back died because they did. The moral layer was added later. The supernatural interpretation was added later. But underneath all of it, there is a memory. A real memory of a real event, passed down across 36 centuries and preserved in one of the most widely distributed texts in human history. Science does not speak with one voice on this. James Kennett, emeritus professor of earth science at UC Santa Barbara and part of the research team, said, "All the observations stated in the ancient account are consistent with a cosmic airburst, but there is no scientific proof that this destroyed city is definitively the Sodom of the ancient texts. That honesty matters. The connection between el-Hammam and Sodom is a hypothesis, not a confirmed finding. Science requires evidence, not pattern matching." Critics challenged some of the mineralogical evidence, arguing the markers cited do not definitively prove a cosmic impact rather than another extreme heat source. A counter-study published in 2022 pushed back on specific interpretations in the original paper. Some of the images used in the 2021 study were also challenged, with critics claiming certain photographs had been altered to support the directional blast theory. The scientific debate is ongoing and contentious. And there is still the older geographical debate. Some archaeologists argue the real candidates are Bab ed-Dhra and Numera near the southern Dead Sea, not el-Hammam, which sits to the north. The ancient texts describe the cities of the plain as being visible from the highlands of Canaan. That geographical detail fits certain locations better than others, and scholars have been arguing about it for decades. What we can say with confidence is this: 2 separate archaeological sites in the Dead Sea region show evidence of sudden, catastrophic, simultaneous destruction by extreme heat. One of them shows destruction signatures that cannot be explained by any conventional event. The region shows evidence of abandonment lasting centuries after the event. And the details of that destruction align, point by point, with an account that has been preserved in human memory for over 3,500 years. Whether you call the site Tal el-Hammam or Sodom, something happened here. Something that ended a civilization in a moment and left a mark so deep that the people who survived it could not stop talking about it for the rest of their lives, and neither could their children or their children's children, all the way down to us. There is a broader pattern worth recognizing here. Across the ancient world, cultures separated by thousands of miles and no known contact with each other all carry stories of catastrophic destruction from the sky, fire from heaven, cities consumed, landscapes made barren, survivors who described the event in religious terms because they had no other framework for what they had witnessed. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis suggests that roughly 12,800 years ago, a cosmic event triggered global climate disruption, mass extinctions, and the collapse of early human civilizations across multiple continents. Researchers who worked on the Tal el-Hammam study were some of the same scientists building that case. If cosmic airbursts shaped the ancient world more than once, if the universe periodically reached down and erased what humans had built, then the stories our ancestors left behind are not superstition. They are the only historical record that survived. Oral tradition is not mythology dressed up as history. Sometimes it is history dressed up as mythology. The two are not as different as we were taught. The ancient world was not primitive. These were large, sophisticated cities with walls, palaces, trade networks, administrative systems, and populations in the thousands. The people who lived in Tal el-Hammam had been building on that site for longer than the entire recorded history of most modern nations. And they could be erased in a second. Not by gods, not by myth, by the universe indifferent, precise, and absolute. The people who survived wrote it into the oldest stories we have. And for thousands of years, we assumed those stories were metaphor. Maybe they were memory. The evidence is still being excavated. The debate is still being had. New studies are being published. Counterarguments are being filed. The science is not settled and may not be for years. But one thing is no longer in question. Something happened here. Something powerful enough to melt platinum. Something fast enough to kill 8,000 people before they could move. Something that left a mark in the earth that scientists can read with laboratory equipment 36 centuries later. A city that had stood for thousands of years was gone in under a second. And the story of what happened to it has never stopped being told. Whatever that something was, it was real. And the fact that we are still talking about it, still arguing about it, still excavating it, 3,600 years later, tells you everything you need to know about the scale of what happened in that valley. Some events are too large to forget. Even when we no longer remember exactly what we are remembering.